spanning the nerd world and feeding your fandom.
Crash landed.
From comics to video games. From the cinematic universe to television.
This is Earth.
Connecting you to the biggest stars in the industry.
Something out there had discovered us.
It's time for the Down and Nerdy podcast. Here's your host, James Witham.
This week we decided it's time to take a stand. It's episode 347 of the Down and Nerdy podcast. I'm James Witham, and yes, Stephen King's The Stand is finally here. It's CBS All Access's brand new miniseries, and I just happen to have Brad William Henke on the show with me this week. He plays Tom Cullen. If you know the story of The Stand, you know how important Tom Cullen is. We're going to see how much we can get him to tease about what's going to be coming up in this miniseries, which you can watch right now on CBS All Access. Speaking of great stories, I also have a great new sponsor this week, the Faraway Collection from Amazon Original Stories. It's a collection of fairy tales retold for adults. Cannot wait to tell you all about it and how you can get a great deal on these faraway stories. Plus, a couple of big reviews that are going to be coming up this week, some new comics that have hit the shelves that I want to talk about. But up next, we've been talking about Pennyworth a lot, but I haven't actually given you my thoughts on the show, so I'll give you my thoughts on the Season 2 premiere of Pennyworth, maybe tease a little bit ahead as well on the Down and Nerdy podcast.
Hi, I'm Cameron Beacon-Dova from Gotham, and you're listening to Down and Nerdy podcast.
You've heard me talk to the cast and one of the creators of Pennyworth. Now, how about my review of Season 2 up to this point? Anyway, so I'm going to say this. Season 2, Episode 1, we're going to dive into some spoiler territory. And then I'm going to go ahead and tease ahead for you a little bit. Again, not going to break down all the details of every episode. You actually heard Jack Bannon say last week, you got Thomas Wayne, who's now the CIA station chief, going to be coming back to London. And then Martha Kane is actually like embedded with the No Name. She's like a full-fledged like agent now. She's like a soldier. It's crazy, her evolution from Season 1 to Season 2. It has been a year, but at the same time, Martha is just a badass in this second season in the early going. But I want to get to Alfred, though, for a second, because, you see him, and again, that's why I asked Jack Bannon about this last week. You see how Alfred was at the beginning of Season 1. Obviously, he's been through a ton. You see him in Season 2, and he is just not the same dude, is he? Or at least he doesn't seem so on the surface. You know, he's not as clearly not as optimistic. He wants to get the hell out of London. He's not necessarily the best dude in this first episode of Season 2. As a matter of fact, if you want to fast forward toward the end of the first episode of Season 2, and what he does, kind of like a bait and switch type deal on the deal that he makes with the No Names, was a very, very interesting tactic to take. And it seems like all he cares about is getting his money and getting out of London. And that just doesn't seem like Alfred Pennyworth. He's still got Dave Boy and Basil by his side. They seem to be just as anxious to get out as he is. But I don't know. There was just something there that it struck me as it was, I don't want to say disappointing, because that's not the right word, but it was like disheartening, I guess is the better way to put it. It's like to see Alfred in this place. Although I got to say, I love the Delaney. The club that he's running, kind of in that neutral zone there, and you see how neutral it is. Like, he doesn't favor one side or the other. He tries to keep it right down the middle. It's very interesting. So the Delaney's like Switzerland, in a way, right? It's a very, very cool and interesting place. One of those kinds of places that could become its own character in a story like this in this season. So that still remains to be seen, though, coming up for this season. But I've got to say that a couple of the new characters that stuck out to me, first of all, was Colonel Salt, who's played by Edward Hogg. And that is the guy that, again, plenty of spoilers here for the first episode, that Alfred and the boys actually abduct for the No Names, and he's supposed to be a key player in the Raven Society. And it seems like he is and he isn't, sort of thing when you first see him, but let me tell you that there's definitely more to Colonel Salt than you even find out in this first episode. Keep an eye on Colonel Salt in the future of season 2. I've gotten to watch ahead a little bit. I'm just saying that right now. Just keep your eye on Colonel Salt. You're not going to want to take him lightly. That's for sure. And another one of the characters that really intrigued me as far as new characters go, that was Alfred's old buddy from his military days, Gulliver Troy, who's played by James Purefoy. He was part of that whole bait and switch deal. Again, there's just something about this guy. You're like, there's no way that this guy is up to no good. And it's almost like is he a mercenary type of situation? Is he loyal to Alfred, or is he loyal to whoever's dollar signs are larger? And it seems like, you're leaning one way or the other there. But again, that's another character that if I were you, I'd keep your eye on that. But I kind of love the early propaganda feel of this second season of Pennyworth. There's not a ton of it in this first episode, but as you go ahead, there's going to be a little bit more of that coming up, and it really plays a role in setting the tone for where things are. Another character that I'm like, I don't know that I trust this guy is Inspector, I should say, Aziz. I don't know where I'm at with him. I mean, I know that he's one of the bigwigs in the no names, and he's trying to do the best he can to save London, because London's the only place that hasn't fallen yet, really, to the Ravens. So at all costs, he's trying to save London. But I don't know, he just seems like kind of a dope, doesn't he? He seems like he's not really. I mean, him not trusting Alfred, that's fine. That doesn't bother me. But it just seems like he doesn't know how to read people, or he's not doing his job properly or something like that. So I'm not sure. I have zero confidence in him, first of all. Second of all, it just seems like he's going to be the foil to screw a lot of things up going forward. No spoilers there. I'm just saying that there's something weird about this guy. But the one character this is going to be one of the more interesting arcs for me, and that is Bet's arc. Because after what Bet does in that Raven interrogation room, when she saves Katie, and first of all, apparently women's rights and how women are treated, very important to Bet Sykes. Who knew, right? Like, who knew that it was that important to her? So she drags this woman out of there, saves her, and now kind of is, I don't know, helping her go on the run, maybe. And yes, you will see this play out more in upcoming episodes. But to me, it's really, really interesting. And when you kind of get Bet's rationale a little bit and how she sees things playing out, and whether or not that's how they're going to play out remains to be seen. Let's just say that Bet is in for a very, very interesting next few episodes. That much I can tell you. But I mean, all of the stuff that you loved from season 1, other than Alfred's demeanor being different, the dynamic between Thomas and Martha there. I mean, Ben Aldridge and Emma Pate's amazing together on screen, just amazing. And the bombshell that's going to be dropped on Martha, it's a big one. And actually, I'll be talking to Ben and Emma next week. Yes, a special Christmas Day edition of the Down and Nerdy podcast will have everybody's favorite couple from Pennyworth, and we'll get more information on season 2 with them coming up next week. But you just love the dynamic between the two of them. It's not all bad with Alfred, too, by the way. You see flashes of the old Alfred. The show is very clever, very funny when it wants to be. It's not obviously not funny all the time, but when it wants to be funny, it can be funny. And again, that uneasy feeling that you get around Lord Harwood, and you're wondering how it is he's doing what he's doing. But he seems to have total control right now in this first episode. So where things are going to be going in Pennyworth, I got to tell you, it is a fun ride. If you haven't jumped into season 2 yet, you're going to want to do that on Epix every Sunday night. You can also catch up on the Epix app as well. Yeah, watch season 2 of Pennyworth. Go back and watch season 1, too, as a matter of fact, if you haven't yet. It is well worth your time and a great holiday binge, quite frankly. That's going to do it for my spoiler-filled review of the first episode of Pennyworth anyway. We teased a little bit ahead, spoiler-free as well. Up next, going to be talking about The Stand from CBS All Access. Going to be talking to Brad William Henke about playing Tom Cullen. Up next on the Down and Nerdy Podcast.
Hi, my name is Mary Mauser from Cobra Kai, and you're listening to the Down and Nerdy Podcast.
You know, there's certain characters from literature, when you hear the name, you're just like, oh, I know who that is. So if I say Tom Cullen, you know I'm talking about Stephen King's The Stand. You know we got the series coming up on CBS All Access. It's going to be happening on December the 17th, and this guy's going to be playing that very character. It's Brad William Henke. What's up, man?
How you doing? It's great to be here.
Good, man. Good. Now, I mean, it's crazy to think actually that The Stand is what, like 40, almost a little over 40 years old now. So were you a fan of the book before you actually signed on for the series?
No, I wasn't. I mean, not that I wasn't a fan. I had not read the book before I was offered the role. And then when I was offered the role, I okay, I'm going to read that book real quick, and then it's 900 pages,
Right,
so,
right.
I started reading the book, and then they sent me the first 4 scripts. And so then I read those scripts. That's how before I accepted the job. But then I read the book, and I also did it on tape because we shot up in Vancouver. So on the drive and everything, I was always listening to the book on tape.
What was that kind of like actually doing that concurrently? Did you like reading the book while you're reading the scripts? Was that, did you see the differences even more there when you were doing it that way, you think?
I tried to, anytime you've read a book, then you see the movie, you go, oh, that wasn't in there.
Right.
Why didn't I put that in there? It's almost like I liked it this time that I read the scripts first. And so then that was my initial thoughts. And then everything else I could just add to it. So I would just try to, every time, especially at the beginning, before I went to go do a scene, I would listen to the book on tape scene. Mm-hmm. And so much more was going on, so much more detail because they had more time. And I would try to throw some of those things in,
Nice. Now, we know that based on the story, there's a lot of aspects to Tom Cullen's personality. So how did you kind of prepare for such a multifaceted character?
Well, it's like you could make a mistake of making it so one-dimensional. And to be honest with you, I like the role because it's a role you could fall on your face. Do you know what I mean? You could do it.
Oh,
terribly.
Yeah.
So that was a worry. You know what I mean? And so that was a worry all the time. And so I just tried to, there was a guy a few years older than me when I went to high school who he hurt his head playing college football. His name was Ed Reinhardt Jr. And a blood clot burst in his brain. And so the rest of his life, he was not the same. What he said to me one time is, in here, still me. And that just broke my heart because he couldn't communicate. He couldn't. And so I really took a lot of that. Like in here, it's me. I'm having these thoughts, but it doesn't translate as much. And so I just tried to really, a lot of my scenes were always shot at I don't know why, at 2 a.m. So I would from 2 to 6 all the time. I'd be one scene and it starts at that time. So I would go there, get there 2 hours early, mm-hmm. and listen to this sleep meditation. And to kind of just blank out my mind, going through the scenes, just like they'd have to wake me up. We're going to go shoot, and I had worked on this stuff so much, maybe in 2 weeks prior, I would always want to be off book. And so then I would just have no thinking, not have to use my mind on those nights. And I would in my preparation, I thought, oh, this could happen or this could happen. But I really did. They said action and I just responded to whatever.
Excellent.
It was the best. I've never had an acting job where I had 3 months to prepare in my life. And so having 3 months to prepare was just, I was like, oh shit, this is what I can do with 3 months to prepare. You know what I mean? It was great that it was in Vancouver because it was raining all the time and I had this apartment and I had my 2 little dogs with me and I just really isolated myself. I just really thought this is a role of my life. Do you know what I mean? If I do something with this. So I'm just going to, I can't say, when I was first working on it, I walked around some days as Tom just to see, how that, because no one knew, you know what I mean? Just,
of course.
Sometimes they go, hey, aren't you the guy from Orange is the New Black? Yeah, but I'm doing it. But that was great because I could just, by the time we were shooting it, there was zero trying. Do you know what I mean? I really would come in that space of just trying to survive and do minute by minute, just make minute by minute decisions.
Mhm.
He doesn't make what's going to happen in 2 weeks. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
It's kind of like they said, like Donald Trump likes to win the day of media. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I just like to win the day of just surviving. That's it.
There you go, man. There you go. I mean, you're talking about kind of isolating yourself. I mean, little did we know that's kind of the thing to do nowadays.
Oh, I was ready for this, man.
Yeah,
I
apparently
doing
you
it
were.
for 6 months. Yeah,
Who knew, man? Who knew? I mean, we're literally going through the pandemic right now, and that very much ties into the story of the stand. So, how relevant do you actually think this story is going to be to our current situation? Maybe.
Well, you know, when you see like people fighting each other, do you know what I mean? Like right now, that really resonates because that's what happened. People said, I'm on this team. I'm on this team. And, you know, it seems like that's kind of what we're doing now. I think that's a lesson that doesn't work.
Yeah, I think you got that right. I think you definitely got that right. I mean, on the flip side of that, though, I mean, you've to say you've got an all-star cast for the stand. I mean, that's an understatement, man. Who's kind of your favorite person to do scenes with? Not trying to get you in trouble or anything, but did you have a favorite person to like do scenes with?
Well, most of my scenes were with Henry Zaga. I loved working with him. He's just he's a great actor, but he's a sweet, I say kid, but he's a sweet guy. And he just we worked so well together. This one time when in the scene where we were going to meet Whoopi, in between takes, you can't really see it. I saw it, but in between takes, they came by. Does anyone want any chocolate? And I was like, yeah. And I was eating this chocolate.
Nice.
I was eating it. And Henry's like, you have to do that in the scene. You know what I mean? And so I don't know if you can tell, but when I'm walking in that scene, I'm eating this chocolate. But it was just fun. You know, it was just fun and creative like that. You know, he was just a great guy to work with.
Awesome. Now, things are pretty, I mean, that seems like a pretty nice way to kind of unwind when you guys aren't shooting. Did you guys kind of do anything else? I mean, because it's pretty dark, pretty serious, the show is. So did you guys do anything else, like when cameras weren't rolling, to kind of lighten things up a bit?
They would sing a lot of songs and hang out in this tent, but I would just sit by myself. Not because I didn't love them. I liked them all a lot. I just wanted to this was my art piece, you know? And so I just wanted to stay in that space. And I mean, it's not like I didn't talk to anyone, but I would just
Sure. No, I know what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah. I just like to sit over there, you know, and I listen to him sing. Yeah. But I just like to save it too. Cause also too, I feel like if you're just like, hey, how you doing? And then you're Tom, even in the scene, you know what I mean? I just it's not like I was talking like Tom when I was out there, but I just carrying myself with that energy.
No, absolutely. So, I mean, just based on the trailers alone, for anyone who might be coming into the series fresh, I mean, the Boulder Free Zone seems like a very interesting place. So how would you describe it?
I would just say, as my character, I just call it home. You know what I mean? Like it just felt like home. And it was a place where people are trying to get along, but my character just simply looked like it as a safe landing spot. You know, I was just watching that documentary, My Octopus. Did you ever see that? Anyway, this guy under the sea becomes friends with this octopus. And so I just kind of felt like that's how I was always trying to survive. And then I could just take a deep breath there.
That makes sense. I got to check that out, man. Guy befriends an octopus. That's
you
one on the list.
You got to watch it. It's incredible.
That sounds incredible. So now we know that there's kind of a battle between good and evil going on here in the stand. And I mean, the Dark Man, that's an intimidating name. Never mind intimidating figure. So what would you say kind of makes him the most dangerous? Of course, try not to spoil anything.
His power to make other people do his dark deeds, and his power to influence other people to follow him and make them feel like that's the way to go. Again, it could be happening right now. You know what I mean? Like it's like, yeah. So I think that was his main power is people believed in him.
So now fans of the book know that Tom was quite a decorator. Do you think, given the way this year's gone, do you think Tom would already be putting his Christmas decorations up or what?
I think Tom would wait till the day after Thanksgiving, but of course he would put it up. Yeah. In fact, when I was in Vancouver shooting this, I got there. I was there a little bit in October, but from November when I got my place, I got a Christmas tree because it was just rainy. It felt like Christmas there, and I left it up. I left it up till I left in March. So I was a lot like Tom. I was doing my porch and lights, and I was being him.
I love that, man. I love that. So now, Brad, before I let you go, I mean, is there a particular episode in the series that you're really looking forward to fans seeing, or did you have a favorite episode that involves Tom? And you're like, oh, when people see this, they're going to freak out.
Yeah, I just think they're going to freak out about what I'm able to accomplish. I can't really say. Do you know what I mean? But I just think
well, I know what you mean because I know the story, but
yeah. I think that they're gonna be surprised of what I can do and what I can survive and what I can go through because of loyalty to the few people that have been nice to me in my life. I think that's what motivates Tom is these people talk to him like a person and try to understand him and have conversations with them. And I think that's why I'm so loyal to them.
How hard is it for you to not just burst out and want to talk about this to everybody you know because you just know how amazing it's going to be? Because for me, I'd be sitting there like, I so want to tell you about the thing, but I can't tell you about the thing.
I'm excited for it to come out because, like I said, I feel like, also too, I would think, man, my character's so great. Like, this is the best character I've ever played. And then I do a scene with, oh my God, their character is amazing too. Oh shit, their character is amazing too. You know what I mean? That was exciting because it felt like, whoa, there's a really high bar and we're all going up here. So I think the show is going to be awesome.
We're all going to find out together, man. The Stand's going to come out on CBS All Access Thursday, December the 17th, and every week after that. So you get to let it breathe a little bit, right? It's going to be really good. I like the weekly release schedule they got going on.
You like that?
Thing. I do. Well, for this particular show, I definitely do. Because I think you're going to need to let it breathe for a week. There's going to be times where you're going to see an episode and you're like, okay, all right, I got a week to prepare for the next one.
I almost watched the whole season of Handmaid's Tale in like one day and all night. And I feel like I went into a depression.
Yeah, you went into a funk. Exactly. That happens to me with shows too. It's like, oh my God, I need to watch cartoons or something now. Jeez.
Yeah. And when I got the first 4 episodes, I'm like, oh shit, this is intense.
Yeah.
I really think, I like you're saying how hard it is. I try to not sell anything I'm in, you know what I mean? But like, it's really good. It's a really good show. I think people are going to love it. And I think that, I thought, well, will they like it with all that's going on? And I think they will. I think they really will, because it's like, this is what could happen if it went too far.
Absolutely, man. And like I said, we'll find out together. December the 17th, right. The Stand begins on CBS All Access. Right. Wait till you see what this guy does.
Yeah,
Tom, it's Brad William Henke. Thank you so much for joining me, man.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
This week, the Down and Nerdy podcast is brought to you by the Faraway Collection, an Amazon original story. Basically, what we've got going on here is it's 5 retold fairy tales for adults, and it kind of takes that happily ever after thing in a really cool, different direction. We've got 5 amazing authors talking about Nick Stone and Gail Forman, just to name a couple. And it's not like the same old stories either. I mean, you've got different kind of takes on an evil queen. You've got Charmless Princes, and there's one in particular, the Star-Crossed Lover story, that's got a very interesting modern and fantasy type angle to it that's really, really interesting. And it's also available in both audio and ebook format. Plus, if you're already an Amazon Prime member, you can listen and read for free. What's better than that, right? So you're going to want to download now at Amazon.com/farawaystories. That's Amazon.com/farawaystories. That's FARAWAY stories. And these are not your same old stories. It's going to give you something wicked, something charming, something scary, but most importantly, something new. So take yourself once again, once upon a time with the Faraway Collection from Amazon Original Stories. Once again, thanks to Brad William Henke for joining me this week to talk about The Stand on CBS All Access. Up next, speaking of reading, find out what we're reading next on the Down and Nerdy podcast.
Hi everyone, this is artist Nicola Scott, and you're listening to the Down and Nerdy podcast.
Whether you've got the tablet or laptop or the old school bags and boards, whatever you're reading on, it's time for what we're reading. And I saw this Black Cat #1 book from Marvel this week, and I wanted to jump into it. It's actually written by Jed McKay, C.F. Villa on the art, Brian Reber on the colors, Ferran Delgado on the letters. Great cover, too, by Pepe Larraz and Marte Garcia. Now, I will say that this isn't your typical #1 issue for a standalone series. It ties directly in to King in Black. Now, this issue does give you kind of bullet points on what happened in King in Black #1 for the main story, but it's kind of best to just read King in Black #1 before this one anyway. I already reviewed it. I already recommended it anyway. I think you should read it. It'll definitely help you appreciate this issue a little bit more. Required reading? Not really, but you should still read it anyway. Now, Felicia Hardy, of course, we know as Black Cat, is kind of planning a heist job. A little bit of spoilers in here, too, by the way. Not just for King in Black #1, but for this issue as well, since it's been out a few days. So she's planning a heist job, and the invasion literally drops on top of her. I mean, literally. So she kind of joins the fight in an interesting way because she wants to figure out, what the hell's going on and why this screwed up the job that she was planning. But so she ends up kind of right there in the fight, and she's there right when the Avengers fall to null. I put fall in air quotes, but we'll get to that a little bit later on. Now, the thing is that she actually escapes this. She's not captured. She actually gets away and ends up finding someone who knows how to combat the symbiotes better than anybody else, or at least in her opinion anyway. And once you see the choice, you kind of understand, maybe this is a person that we need to reach out to and should help. Now, she actually has an idea for another heist, and it's based on something that happens in King in Black #1, and it might actually end up just saving the day. And I say heist, this is not your traditional heist. Who she wants to steal from, what she wants to steal, is not just some regular everyday thing, okay? So that's the cool part of the story that I will not spoil for you. This actually puts Black Cat in a big role in King in Black. And that is not something I expected. I love it, actually. This is a character, this is one of those out of left field kind of things that you go, I did not expect this character to have a role like this in this story, and she does, and I think that that's amazing. I mean, even with a different artist, too, the presentation's still very good for the main story, and there's actually a partial retelling of King in Black #1 in this, because you can't really tie this in without doing that. And the art team does a great job at recreating those events from Hardy's perspective. And that's one thing that's the marking of a good tie-in to me. Give me, if you're going to tie this in, give me the events from this character's perspective and not just show me what happened. Okay, and they absolutely 100% do that. And I thought that was a very smart move by the team in this issue. The book has an attitude to it, and I really, really like that. It kind of breaks from the tension of the serious events that happen in King in Black #1. Acknowledges the significance, but doesn't dwell on it, and actually takes a different spin on where the story can go from here. So tie-in or not, this is a really interesting side story, one that I'm very happy to say you should definitely add to your collection, Black Cat #1 from Marvel Comics. I actually wanted to jump into another event series, this time from DC, and this one's been kind of flying under the radar, and I'm going to jump in the middle of it for you. It's Aquaman #66 from DC Comics. Andy Lanning and Ron Mars writing this one here. Ron Mars actually been a big part of this Endless Winter storyline and a bunch of the different parts. Miguel Mendonca on the art, Ivan Placencia on the colors, Clint Cowles on the letters, and another good cover here from Mike McCone and Peter Steigerwald. Now, again, spoilers here because this book's been out for a few days now, and again, you don't necessarily have to read the previous parts of Endless Winter to find out what's going on here, because again, they do a little bit of a summation. Plus, this is again from Arthur's perspective, because Arthur and Mara are supposed to be on their honeymoon, and they're interrupted by the invasion of the Frost King, who's brought Endless Winter to Atlantis, pretty much. And it also actually marks the return of Arthur and Mara to Atlantis. Now, they weren't exactly met with the warmest of welcome from everyone, but it's clear how important Atlantis still is to the couple. They also have their daughter Andy in tow, and Andy is just the cutest kid. I'll say that right now. That is brought out so much in this issue. And you see the mischief of everyday life of kids is actually involved in this issue. Not a ton, just enough to make parents like myself go, yeah, that's what would actually happen in the situation, and don't gloss over that. So I love that there's a little bit of that parental realism in this issue. If you're not a parent, maybe you can't appreciate it, but I did. So thanks to the team for throwing that in there. Now, here's the other thing. Arthur's already got a plan when they're on their way to Atlantis, but it involves a really dangerous mission, and I don't really want to spoil too much about this. Now, this is proof positive, though, that knowledge of history could actually save your life someday. So if you ever think to yourself, when am I ever going to use this? You never know when. And Arthur Curry's knowledge of Atlantean history and certain little idiosyncrasies might actually save the entire world in this instance, not just Atlantis. So they take a trip to the depths near the core of the earth to recruit some help against the endless winter and the Frost King. Now, what Arthur's idea is actually kind of, it's on the nose, but it's brilliant at the same time. It's like, yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. Once you see who they're trying to recruit and what they can do, it makes more sense than anything you could really try against somebody like this. So you won't be lost, like I said, if you're not caught up on Endless Winter, but I mean, if you want more backstory on the Frost King and what's going on, there's actually a good bit of that in Justice League number 58, which is part 5 of Endless Winter, which again I recommend reading anyway. But if you want more backstory on the character of the Frost King, you're going to get more of it in that than you will in this particular issue. You get enough, but you don't get as much as you probably should. Beyond this larger story, though, is the depth of Arthur and Mira's relationship. There's some really great character moments here that, again, might get lost in the larger story, and a personal touch that I kind of feel like's been missing from recent Aquaman runs until recently. We're getting more of that a little bit now. But, the heart and soul of the book just wasn't there for so many issues for me, and that's why I kind of dropped off of Aquaman for a while. But this is one of those issues that's going to make you want to jump back in and start reading Aquaman again, if this is the direction and the tenor that they're going to take. Plus, there's some really eye-popping art with some really cool creatures that are in this book, and that's just one of those things that you can do in an Aquaman book that maybe you can't do in other books. Not just sea creatures either, trust me. There's some really good stuff going on. So a couple of good tie-ins to some major arcs this week. You're going to want to add Black Cat number 1 from Marvel and Aquaman number 66 from DC Comics. That's going to do it for what we're reading. Up next, who says there's no nerd news during the holidays? We'll jump into a bunch of it next. I'm James Witham, and this is the Down and Nerdy Podcast.
Hey, this is Kari Walgren, the voice of Haruko in FLCL, and you are listening to the Down and Nerdy Podcast.
If you're a gamer, it looks like you might have a little bit more money for your holiday shopping. It's time for nerd news, and I wish that there was a nicer way to put this, but there really isn't, and that Cyberpunk 2077 launch has been a disaster in an almost unprecedented move, as a matter of fact. The game has been pulled from the PlayStation Network store, and players have been offered a full refund that have already purchased the game. Now, of course, the game was developed and made by CD Projekt. Now, here's the thing. Here's the statement that was on the Ask PlayStation Twitter account. It says, SIE strives to ensure a high level of customer satisfaction, and we will begin to offer a full refund for all gamers who have purchased Cyberpunk 2077 via PlayStation Store and want a refund. I'm just going to stop there because then the other thing just says about the link. So, before we go ahead and give Sony a pat on the back here for this, while they're certainly not the ones to blame for a buggy game that was put out by CD Projekt and something that was clearly rushed out for holiday profit, no matter what anybody says, Sony has to take a little bit of blame here. And I know that this game is available for multiple consoles. But at the same time, you could have done this proactively if you really want to be honest about it. Like, you have to know to a certain degree how buggy this game is or how not ready it was before you even put it up for sale in the first place. I just fail to believe that they didn't have at least some idea what was going on with Cyberpunk 2077 before they put it in here. They do not deserve the lion's share of the blame. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that if you really, quote, strive to ensure a high level of customer satisfaction, maybe you should have looked into this before you actually put the game on sale in the first place, because you had to know that something was not right here. I have multiple delays. You'd think they would have been able to get it right by now, but clearly they didn't. And one of the reasons, actually, that you don't hear me talk about video games a lot on the show anymore is because of stuff like this. Stuff like this happens way too much. Not necessarily to this level, mind you, but stuff like this just happens way too much. And you could go down a list. I mean, Fallout 76, you've got Anthem, you've got the disaster that was No Man's Sky. There, you could say that Marvel's Avengers game, to a certain degree, was rushed out or just didn't look good in general. It's just, to me, something's happened to the video game industry. And this is not a new problem necessarily, but it seems like it's getting worse. And I know that I'm not saying that this happens to all games. There are plenty of games that come out when they're supposed to come out, or they delay them to make sure they get rid of as many bugs as possible. And I'm not even saying that you have to launch your game with no bugs. That would be nice, but that's not always going to happen. Stuff like this, bugs are going to be found, and sometimes they're either little things or stuff that's like deeply embedded in, and you're just not going to know until the game starts getting played at a certain point. I can give a pass on a mostly functional game, but to me, it's almost like a 50-50 thing. It's like half the games come out way too soon or with way too many bugs. There's too much carelessness right now in the video game industry. I don't care what anybody says. So you've got to get stuff like this right. And if you've gotten to the point where a major game seller like Sony is going to pull something from their store, that's a big deal. Okay, that is a huge red flag. And people have waited forever for this new Cyberpunk game. It was announced at E3, seems like almost 7 years ago or something like that. And here we are, and this is what you give the people that have waited this long for. This is one of the biggest slaps in the face of any video game launch ever. And pretty much everybody involved in this, quite frankly, should be ashamed of themselves. And again, I wish this was a new problem. I wish that this was something that rarely ever happened. But it seems like we get at least a handful of these a year. And to me, I'm sorry, I know that a ton of games come out every year. A handful of situations similar to this one, or even somewhat similar, is too much. And the money that gets invested by players, by consumers in the video game industry to play these games is already ridiculous enough. And this is what you give us. Unacceptable. Completely 100% unacceptable. And this whole industry needs to take a look at itself and get it right. I don't care how long it takes you to make your game. Make sure you get it right. And if you're going to make us wait this long, you better get it right sooner rather than later. Utterly ridiculous that this even had to happen in the first place. Unacceptable. So here's something on a little bit of a much better note. Quite frankly, we have more casting news for DC's Black Adam movie, and it's going to be Quintessa Swindell, who's going to be playing Cyclone. Now, if you're not familiar with Cyclone, this according to The Hollywood Reporter, by the way, Cyclone's going to be one of the JSA members in the movie, joining Hawkman, Atom Smasher, and Dr. Fate. And Cyclone is actually the daughter of the original Red Tornado. And if you've listened to this show enough, for long enough anyway, you know I'm a Red Tornado fan. I love the character. I was even the one apologizing for the Red Tornado that they presented in the Supergirl TV series, okay? That's how badly I wanted to see this character in any medium on television or movies at all. So I was already excited for Cyclone to be in this movie in the first place. And you know that, Cyclone has the wind powers, has the sound powers as well. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson tweeted his approval for the casting as well. And as far as Quintessa Swindell, I think they're going to do a great job in this role. I mean, it just seems like a really good fit in this role. And I think this cast is actually really, really starting to come together well. And in that tweet of praise, by the way, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson actually revealed there is a spring 2021 production start date, I should say, for DC's Black Adam. So that now we know the wheels are really starting to turn now, and hopefully this thing will get off the ground sooner rather than later. Hopefully no delays here as well, because I think that this movie is going to be a really big surprise. And I think that with the cast that they have here and the way that they're presenting this thing, got to be some major stuff happening in this Black Adam movie. I want to stick with DC for a minute because DC's actually made quite a few pretty major comic book related announcements in the last week and a half, and I wanted to kind of highlight some of them really quickly because I want to get through as many as I can. And you know that they've got DC Future State coming out starting in January, and one of the things that we were wondering about is the next Batman, and written by John Ridley, and we were told that Batman would be a person of color, and now we know who that person of color is, and the character is going to be Tim Fox. Now, I know that, there was a lot of speculation who the character might be. Luke Fox seemed like the popular choice. We knew it was probably going to be somebody from the Fox family. And then anybody that's not, deep into the lore here says, well, Tim Fox, who is that? And the character actually dates back to 1979. That's how long this character's been around. Now, more recently referenced, I think it was Batman 101, which was not too long ago, is when the character's kind of been reintroduced. But if you know anything about Tim Fox, this is one of the Fox children, of course, of Lucius Fox. But he doesn't get along with Dad. Like, they clash a lot. They butt heads a lot. He's certainly more strong-willed. The more strong-willed of the Fox children. So if anybody was going to step outside of the family and take on the mantle of Batman all these years later, you could see how it could be Tim Fox instead of Luke Fox. Like for me, when I went back and after the announcement, and I really gave it some thought, I was like, you know what? Yeah, that's probably right. Yeah, that probably makes more sense. And after everything that the Fox family's been through, it would also make sense that somebody would want to eventually step up and take on the mantle. Now again, we don't know a ton about what's going to be coming up in the next Batman and how exactly this all comes to pass with Tim Fox becoming the new Dark Knight. So that is one of the reasons that you want to read the book, right? You want to figure out how this all comes about and how long this will last, and if this is something that we'll see again at some point. Again, these are all things that remain to be seen. But you know what? Money talks. And if this book sells, I wouldn't be surprised if we see a lot more of Tim Fox as Batman, at least in some sort of alternate story or future timeline story, because we are talking about, again, future state here. So, again, this might not be the last we see of this character, but it all depends on the dollars and cents of this issue. But it seems like DC really wants to get some fresher perspectives in 2021. And I say that because they've announced a lot of new creative teams this week, and I don't want to dive too much into all of them, but I want to highlight a few, like Philip Kennedy Johnson going to be taking on a Superman story, not just in Superman, but in Action Comics as well, and taking on a bigger role in writing Superman. And I think that, you know how much I love Philip Kennedy Johnson's work as a writer. I think he's pretty much everything he's done, I've really enjoyed. So I'm super excited to see his take on Superman, especially since, Philip Kennedy Johnson, a big-time family man, and I think that is something that has to be at the center of any Superman book, especially with him having a family and with John taking over as Superman in Future State and where this is going to go in the future. I think that you couldn't have a character like Superman in better hands right now, and good for Philip Kennedy Johnson. So happy to see him getting recognized finally in superhero comics, especially with somebody like DC, and finally getting the recognition he deserves. Can't wait to see what he does with this character. And another name that's kind of burst onto the scene in the last 6 months is Stephanie Phillips, who we know is going to be writing Harley Quinn next year. But guess what? Now going to be taking on a Wonder Woman digital series as well, starting in January. Sensational Wonder Woman is also going to feature Megan Hetrick on art and Marissa Louise on color. So a female creative team there as well. Wonder Woman going to be taking on Dr. Psycho in this story. So you've got Stephanie Phillips now writing Harley Quinn and a Wonder Woman story. And again, Stephanie's got a great sense for storytelling and always gives us a little bit of an edge to all of her stories too. And there's just always so much intrigue involved in this, and I'm super excited to see what Stephanie's going to bring to the table for both of these characters. And I'm not sure which one she's going to end up writing better, Harley Quinn or Wonder Woman. I'm looking forward to them both, but I got to say, I'm on the fence here. I'm not sure. I feel like she's got a good attitude for both, and they're two very different characters. So the angles that she takes on this, I can't wait to see where that's going to go. I think that's going to be really, really neat. And then I said this in the article that I put it down in nerdypodcast.com, that it seems to me like DC's, with every passing year, they take Nightwing a little bit more seriously and give him a little bit larger role in the main line of comics. And we've got a new creative team coming to Nightwing as well, starting in March. And boy, is it a big one. Tom Taylor and Bruno Redondo are going to be the creative team on Nightwing, starting with issue number 78. Now, Tom Taylor has killed Dick Grayson twice, to be fair. So, I mean, yeah, it was Injustice and Deceased. But he's actually said in the quote, he's like, hey, I'm a huge Nightwing fan. Okay, well, let's try to keep him alive this time, Tom, huh? Let's see how that's going to go. And apparently there's going to be a new mayor of Bloodhaven, and things are going to be going on there. And there's also maybe a puppy that's going to be involved in this, some sort of dog, and maybe Batgirl going to be part of this story as well. But the main point here I'm getting at is, in all of these announcements, is that DC, they've got a lot of amazing writers. Okay, I'm not saying that I haven't enjoyed a lot of the stuff that, hey, I love a long run like Joshua Williamson on The Flash. For as long as Joshua Williamson has written that character, I have loved that. Tom King's run on Batman for as long as it was, I love that. I love it when creative teams stick with these characters, but at the same time, it comes to a point where you go, okay, let's get some fresh voices, and not just recycled voices either. Let's not just take one person off one major book and put them on another. It doesn't mean that they're not good writers. It's just that sometimes you've got to give some fresh new talent a chance and see how they do, right? So you have to see how Philip Kennedy Johnson's going to take on a character like Superman, a hugely important character. Stephanie Phillips, how is she going to do on a Wonder Woman book, on Harley Quinn? Now, Tom Taylor obviously does not need to prove himself at all, and I'm not saying that the other two do either, but they are certainly on the less experienced end of the spectrum as far as major releases like this are concerned, and I think they're going to do a fantastic job. If anything, I'm surprised it's taken this long for somebody like DC to realize that, hey, there's some talent here that we should be using on these major characters. I just think this is going to be a huge win for DC in 2021 and a great shot in the arm to the publishing line that kind of needed a little bit of freshening up for sure. So I'm really looking forward to what they're going to be bringing to the table. Finally, I want to throw this out there too as well. Shadow and Bone, a new series going to be coming to Netflix. And if you're a fan of Lee Bardugo and the Grishaverse, guess what? Yeah, Shadow and Bone is the series that's going to be coming. They did put out a teaser. Doesn't really show you much, quite frankly, but it does show you how visually striking this series has a chance to be. And it's basically, if you're not familiar with it, it's a war-torn world where the lowly soldier and orphan Alina Starkov has just unleashed an extraordinary power that could be the key to setting her country free. There's all these monstrous threats too. You've got the Shadowfold that's a part of this. There's just it's a fantasy type element of this story. There's all kinds of magical soldiers and things like that. So yeah, we're going down that particular road again of sci-fi fantasy, and something that, quite frankly, Netflix has done very well. They've picked and choose their projects, and they've done a great job with it. And then you've got Eric Heiser, who's an Academy Award winner, by the way, for adapting things, and he's going to be the showrunner and writer that's going to adapt this series for Netflix. And they've announced the cast that they've announced, a lot of fairly new names that you might not recognize. You want the full list, go to downandnerdypodcast.com. There's a ton of them. I don't really want to single out anybody in particular, so you can go ahead and read the cast members down there. So this will be coming out in April of 2021. If once a trailer comes out, we'll be talking about it a little bit more. But I got to tell you, this is one of those shows that's right up my alley. If you give me a show that's similar to this, and I'm going to check it out, quite frankly. So I'm really looking forward to see where this thing is going to go. That's going to do it for this week's edition of the Down and Nerdy Podcast. Again, thanks to Brad William Henke for joining me this week to talk about The Stand, which you can watch right now on CBS All Access. You'll see him in episode 3, by the way, debuting as Tom Cullen. You can also check out our sponsor this week, the Faraway Collection from Amazon Original Stories. You want to go to amazon.com/farawaystories. And if you're a Prime member, you can read or listen absolutely free. So you're definitely going to want to check out these amazing stories that they have available for you. You want more about us? You can always do that at downandnerdypodcast.com. Also find us on social media at downandnerdy757 on Twitter and Instagram, and at downandnerdy on Facebook. Remember, you never have to apologize for being a nerd, so let your fan flag fly, be good to your fellow nerds, and hopefully you had a happy Hanukkah.